Hello, ladies and gents. It's me again. It's this again. Y'all know the drill. I rammed the iron door open with the force of inertia I'd accumulated dashing up the stairs. I clenched my hands into fists. My head was burning with white heat. With my worst fears confirmed, it took all of my willpower to keep myself from snapping. The witch stood there, smiling under the red moonlight.
お楽しみ中なのに無粋ね。でもあなたなら歓迎しちゃうわ。いらっしゃい、レン君。
猿か。
ちょっと早かったわね。残念。あと少しだったのに。
Rizulka glanced down at her feet. Lying there was the prone form of none other than Kasumi. Her body was entirely engulfed in shadows, only her face was still visible. All I could see from this angle was her expression, but the twisted look of agony there said it all. You've done it now. Bring it on, bitch. You crossed the one line that should never have been crossed. She was still breathing. She only lost consciousness. Fuck that! Nothing could excuse what Rizulka had done. Not in a million years. So... I'll kill the little bitch. I quickly formed the guillotine, tempered with pure killing intent. I stomped on the asphalt with enough force to break it to pieces and was about to unleash my blinding rage when... Rizulka recited the words to form her own on an herb. It manifested in the form of long and crooked iron chains and immediately shot after me, shadowing my accelerated actions as though they had a will of their own. I could almost hear them murmuring, "I won't ever let you get away. Don't run. I'll drag you to your knees." Her honor was like a clingy ex-girlfriend. It felt so vindictive and fitting of her that I wanted to throw up. I wouldn't let such pathetic things interfere with my lightning dash. Yet I still couldn't believe what had just happened. A single strike. A single slice of the guillotine had shattered Rizulka's honor, like it was nothing. It was too easy. There was no way a top-class weapon fused with the soul of an apparently centuries-old witch could break that easily.
やるね、レン君。でもまだ終わりじゃないよ。
And more importantly, how could she possibly still be alive after I had shattered what should have been her very soul? My question vanished a second later as huge stone walls covered in spikes suddenly sprouted from the ground at both of my sides. Faced with the dual threat of getting crushed and impaled, I jumped with all my might before the execution tools could close in on me. Just made it. The spikes had grazed part of my leg, but I survived. My suspicions were confirmed. Not even an ounce of agony appeared on Rizulka's face as I sliced several spikes off one of the walls. It was like she was completely ignoring the Princess Bowls of Onanurb. Damn it, I wasn't gonna make any progress whether I ran or attacked at this point. I couldn't even approach Kasumi, much less do something about that bitch.
でもまだまだ不慣れね。ほら、こんなに読みが浅い。
The deeply ominous undertone to her cheery voice sent shivers down my spine. The next thing that showed up was a steel figure modeled after a girl. The double doors in its front were wide open, revealing its interior of countless sharp spikes.
レン君だって聞いたことくらいあるでしょ。アイゼルネ・ユングフラン。日本語で言うと鉄の処女だったかしら。
Iron Maiden. Yeah, I'd heard of those alright. It was a name of an insane torture device. As the name implied, it was a so-called casket made of iron. What set it apart from the rest was that its front had the sculpture of a woman, while the inside was littered with iron thorns. Victims would be pushed into the casket while still alive and have the thorns skewer and drain them of blood until they expired. Rather than a torture device, it was more of an execution device. It was probably also her honor herb, just like the chains and wall from before. It was impossible. It was all utterly incomprehensible, and she allowed me no time to think. Also, I'm pretty sure the image is supposed to be a solid, like, quarter of the screen higher. Like, either the top quarter of the screen is going to be used for something in a minute, which is the less likely of the two scenarios, or the QA guys fucked up again. Like, again, I'm becoming a little bit depressed at how unpolished this release feels. The iron figure approached me in an attempt to swallow me in. It was obviously planning to turn me into Swiss cheese. I evaded with a somersault, but the chain was already waiting for me where I'd planned to land. Yes, this clearly wasn't normal. I didn't claim to be an expert on their abilities, but this wasn't right. She was breaking the rules. I thought there was only one honor nerb for one person. Did she have multiple honor nerb? If that were possible, why couldn't the others do it? Since I didn't have all that many opponents, I didn't have much of a basis to go on. Yet Rusalka was clearly an abnormality. She had too many weapons, too many exceptions, and their forms were too irregular. I almost felt like commending her for her diverse aptitude. Even petty tricks became a work of art once polished to perfection. It seemed she had a perfect grasp on all the loopholes in this business. Perhaps she'd noticed uneasiness past my glare, as Rusalka gave me a smug look, a bewitching smile upon her lips. Like a cat toying with a mouse, a vixen who beguiled countless men to their undoing.
理解できないって顔してるね。一体何がわからないのかな。ほらほら、疑問があるならお姉さんに聞いてごらんなさい。
うるせえ、黙ってろよ若作り。
怖い怖い。ま、教えてくれなくてもレン君が何を悩んでるのかなんてお見通しなんだけどね。わからない？理解不能？嬉しいわね。ゾクゾクしちゃう。その顔が悔しそうに歪んでいるところを見れるだなんて思ってもいなかったわ。生物は原則一つ。魂が結びついてるから壊れれば術者も死ぬ。何も間違ってはいないわよ。あなたの懸念は至極まっとう。強いて言うなら何事にも例外はつきものということ。車に乗ることと馬の手綱を握ることは違うけれど、どちらも距離を詰めるということは同じでしょ。
In other words, it wasn't a matter of mastery, but difference in areas. She understood a side of Honorab that neither I nor the rest of the Obsidian Round Table knew existed, and that made her an exception even among their ranks. An old seeker of forbidden arts, the ancient witch of the abyss. As if to prove my observation, she produced something that looked like a bundle of papers in her hand.
私の生物は一つだけ。それがこの日記。
A diary? That was Rusalka's Honorab? And
だとしたら、こいつらは一体何なんだよ。
I dodged the charging Iron Maiden and cut down the chains that tried to knock me off guard from behind, not daring to stop even for a moment. The bitch set up traps while we were in the middle of a conversation, and above all, nothing she said matched up with the facts. If that eerie bundle of papers was her weapon of choice, then where the hell were these chains and torture devices coming from?
不思議なことなんて何一つないわよ。だって生物は魂と想念を糧に生まれるもの。重要なのは形じゃなく、そこにどんな妄念が詰まっているか。ほら、この国でもあるでしょ。死を裁く怖い山が、あらゆる罪状と裁きを刻んだ手記とか。仮にそれが選ばれたらねえ、一体どうなると思う？まさかそのまま殴りつける形になるとは言わないわよね、レン君。
Although that would be funny in and of itself. So was she trying to say the thing in her hands was a grimoire? A fucked up picture book that she didn't use to physically assault others, but rather was filled with spells and other mumbo-jumbo? With that, all the pieces finally started coming together in my mind. The Iron Maiden, binding chains, dark red spikes. All the weapons Rusalka used had one thing in common.
拷問具。そうか。そいつに記されているのは。
ええ、ご明察。私の生物はエリザベート・バートリーの日記なのよ。彼女が晩年それらの拷問器具を使用して楽しんだ経歴が赤裸々に書き綴っているわけだからね。あとはもうわかるでしょ。
Just as she finished that mocking remark, chains came rushing out of Rusalka's shadows like a tidal wave. A whole bunch of cursed torture tools on par with Honorab and an Honorab that controls them? You gotta be shitting me.
反則じゃねえかそんなもん。
でしょうね。まあそれでも形成以外の頃は軽減させた拷問器具のダメージも私の肉体にフィードバックしてたからさほど万能ってわけでもないのよ。けれどほら、私ったら努力家だから根気よく年月をかけて練り上げるのは得意なのよ。ほら。
Though I was pretty much tearing through the surging sea of chains, barely even able to see ahead, it was almost like it had no effect on her. No matter how many different torture tools I attacked, it seemed like it was doing no damage to Rusalka. It was like the car and horse example she told me. Unlike us, who used our honor in the way we're taught to, she discovered alternate methods and applied them at her will. Her cunning and mastery of the arcane made all those irregular powers possible. As such, aiming for victory through shattering her honor was futile. It wasn't the diary, but she herself that I had to cut down.
いいのかよ。 そんなにベラベラと自分の生物について語っちまってよ。
When it came to the source of her confidence,
ええ、構わないわよ。拷問器具のびっくり箱なんて所詮形成以外の能力なんだから、知られたところで何も変わらないわ。
in other words, she was still going easy on me. Summoning all those monstrosities was mere child's play to her. She was at a deeper level I hadn't reached yet. Hers was not mere foolish cockiness. She had real power to back it up. It only seemed like she let her guard down. It only seemed like she had let her guard down while she was merely toying with me.
あら、レオンから聞いてないの？活動、形成、創造、流出。生物を操るエイビシカイトには4つのレベルがあるっていうこと。
Sakura had indeed told me about them before, but she hadn't given me a detailed explanation of Beria or Absoluth. Rusalka's mocking smile deepened as she read my expression.
そう、それより上の異界について教えてもらってないんだ。あの子はそういうサービス精神が足りないといつも思うのよね。
そいつは嬉しくて涙が出るよ。それで残り2つっていうのは一体どんなものなんだ？
Rusalka winked and blew me a kiss. Suppressing my exasperation, I asked her about Beria and Absoluth. The whole situation irritated me to no end, but I had to get as much information out of her as I could.
まずは創造異界についてね。創造っていうのは自分と自分の生物にとって都合のいいルールを一つだけ生み出すってこと。そしてこのルールは物理常識には縛られない。どんな高等無形なことだって現実と化すの。
So I assume that, what's his name? Wilhelm's. The rule associated with his Beria degree is, it's always night. That seems like the sort of the weird thing that's going on within the creation figment, so it makes sense.
そんな
Was it really possible? Rusalka didn't appear to be lying.
まるでデタラメな話でしょ。言ってみれば世界をペテンにかける能力、それが創造異界よ。でもまあそれもまた物理法則の内側といえば内側なんだけれど、創造の効果が及ぶのは発動させた術者が規定する範囲の中にいるものすべて。これが波動ね。世の中がどうあってほしいかと願う気質を持つかどうか。レイなんかがその代表例だわ。そして逆に自分の体を変性させる場合、これは愚道ね。クリストフなんかがこれに当たるけど、代表的なのはマキナかしら。で、そうした性質の差異はあれど、どちらにしても創造は強力無比な奇跡の技よ。どんなルールを授かるかは術者の渇望と生物の相性で決まる。
渇望
An unfulfilled dream you kept on chasing and wishing for. If creation meant fulfillment of that dream, then my craving would probably be
波動か愚動か。こればっかりは自然に決まるものだから後天的に変えるのは難しいけれど、どちらにしてもここに到達できて一流。それ以下は紛れもなく凡俗でしょうね。
Ah, so that was it. That was why she was so confident. I must have looked like nothing more than a bug to her in my present state.
じゃあその上の流出っていうのは何なんだ？
流出以外に関しては誰も到達していないから詳しくは知らないわ。せいぜいが創造の超強力版ってことくらい。仮説だけはあるけれど、おそらくは創造のルールが術者の意識する範囲から流出する。ま、こればっかりは到達してからのお楽しみよね。もっとも
Her face suddenly warped for but a single second.
そんな考えたくもないんだけど。
She stared at me with a face full of complex and contradictory emotions as she resumed her attack. Giant stone walls and needles so big they were more like long, sharp lances shot at me. I dodged the stone slabs, but the flesh off my left arm vanished as I tried to bounce one of the needles off. A single touch of a needle was enough to melt through my clothes and burn my skin like acid. Rusalka broke out into another sadistic grin when she saw it eat into my bones.
どう？私の説明わかりやすかったかしら？
それなりにな。
Rusalka sounded like she was enjoying herself. I didn't learn all that much about Atsaluth, but I felt like I understood the basic principles of Baryon now. It was all about discovering a rule that made all sorts of unrealistic and convenient phenomena happen, and forcefully imposing it on yourself and others. In that case, the pitch-black darkness currently covering the school and the red moon in the sky were...
この夜も想像の発動によるものなのか。
そうよ。これはベイの想像。想像が発動した今、この世界全体があいつの腹の中ってわけ。もっとも今の場合、強固な異物が多すぎて従前に威力を発揮できていないけどね。あとはまあおもちゃがすぐ壊れないように遊んでるからかな。
Me, Rusalka, Sakurai, and Kane, the four of us were all drawn into his world, and he showed a great interest in Shido. He didn't want to kill him instantly, and thus was still going easy on us. When she said that we were in his belly, she probably wasn't speaking metaphorically or anything. If I was the only one here and he went all out, my soul would have probably melted into this blood-sucking night in a few minutes or so. All the questions plaguing me had been answered. As such, now is finally the time for...
さあ、サービスはここでおしまい。
With that somewhat regretful voice, she told me she was done playing around.
よく見ててね、レン君。私、全部見せちゃうんだから。
She was playing with me just like Wilhelm was. She never had any intention of letting me get out of this alive from the start. Though she hadn't made any suspicious moves and I couldn't feel any killing intent from her, the air around me suddenly froze over. It was coming, the craving, the creation figment of an ancient witch in a child's body was on its way to tear this reality. Her long hair, the same color as the moon, danced in the darkness.
物見が眠るさよなかに。
It was an echo different from a voice.
皆そこを離れることぞ嬉しけれ。
Something that wasn't air passed through me, a vibration that shook not my eardrums but my soul.
皆の表を頭もて、波立て遊ぶぞ楽しけれ。澄める大気を震わせて、互いに高く呼び交わし、緑の濡れ髪打ち震い。
Something was coming. The torture tools surrounding me disappeared just as suddenly as they appeared. But I couldn't run. That ominous song had robbed my feet of the very concept of fleeing. It was miasma, and at the same time, a thoroughly captivating and beautiful song of a witch.
乾かし遊ぶぞ楽しけれ。ブリアジェイテハンガリアンナハツェラ
As soon as she finished chanting, jet black shadows spread like coloring book pictures. I promptly jumped away from those immense tremors. Rusalka's shadow began covering the ground at an ungodly speed, almost as though a shadow had thrown a bucket of black paint at her feet. If you think like all the way back to, I think the first time Rusalka was doing exposition on the roof, I think there was a scene where her like shadow melted the fence behind her, right? So this is more or less within expectations. Like her creation figment has something to do with her shadow. I couldn't see how it could have been dangerous. It wasn't even causing damage to anything. It didn't seem much different from the things binding Kasumi. However, it was bad news. There was no logic or basis behind that assumption, but my sixth sense told me that thing was full of malice. It would probably be the end of me if I touched or stepped on it. A damned annoying craving if I ever saw one.
勘がいいのね。でもまだ遅いわ。さあ、足を引いてあげる。
A scrap of the shadow touched my tiptoes right as I heard that voice, and its effect manifested right that instant. All froze still, not just my body, but everything. Was it the shadow's magic power that seeped into my body and coiled around my soul and mind? Like a fugitive on the run, or perhaps a fairy that brings about corruption, it brought my very existence to a halt. I realized that this binding power was so immense it would completely seize everything it took its prisoner. Touching my tiptoes was all it took for it to freeze me. If that shadow covered half my body, even my breathing would be completely at her mercy. A complete opposite of Shadow Tag. That was...
お前の想像。
そう。そして、あなたと私にある決定的な異界の差。
And as if to prove her words, I couldn't shake off the shadow following me no matter what I did. I turned into but a mouse running about the roof in a frenzy, unable to escape the witch's grasp. But even so...
地味だって？確かにね。レイの想像に比べたら効果は単純、範囲も限定。 空間そのものを塗りつぶすような派手さはないし、悪辣な力技でもない。でもね、言ったでしょレン君、私は技巧派、繊細なの。強力無比な唯一よりもあらゆる状況に対応可能な千変万化を選んだだけ。
Oh, it would also make sense if, like, this is how she was controlling, Kane.
絶対強固な技であるほど改変は難しく、また融通も利かなくなる。単調ということはすなわちアレンジが容易であると知りなさい。だからほら。
At that moment, as though reacting to that almost childlike exclamation of pride, the shadow following me gained thickness and rose up from the ground.
こんなこともできちゃう。驚いちゃったかしら。これも私の影。
I was so awed by that unexpected sight that I couldn't speak. But from before me loomed a pitch-black giant. What had been just scribbles on the ground gained another dimension and now towered above me.
驚いた。この世界にはね、エビヒカイト以外の魔術も存在するの。世界真理へ挑める高尚な勇気を保てる人間なんて、清掃騎士団ですら、あとは副首領くらいだけどね。どう？神秘の端に触れてみたいなら、レン君も影に仲間入りする？きっといいお友達になれると思うわ。
The surface of the shadow squirmed as if to prove her point. What I had caught a glimpse of were probably the souls she had devoured. A familiar of darkness carefully sewn together from countless souls. I felt like I could hear the screams of those trapped from within here. Trapped within from here.
それ！
Rage and fear both ran through me as I listened to her cheerful voice. The unpleasant shadow blocking my path stretched out its arm. I couldn't stand it. I refused to accept a wish like that. I cut off the giant's stretched arm, trying to shake off the discomfort wrapping around my very soul. The shadow on the ground paid it no heed and continued to stretch toward me, but I didn't care about it anymore. I couldn't stand this craving. Tug my foot? Get me trapped with the rest of them? Did you seriously think I was gonna get eaten by your crappy apparition and dance happily with the other fools in that two-dimensional world? Get fucking real.
お前が願っていることは単なる卑屈な嫉妬だろうが。
All she was doing was venting her frustration of wishing for things out of her league, and even getting innocent people involved in her shit. Where the hell did that bitch get off when all she was showing off was what a big loser she was? To say the least of.
俺の失踪を妨げようとかしてんじゃねえぞ!
I sliced the giant in two. Its counterattack hit me right in the stomach before the damn thing evaporated, but at least I got it out of the way. Still, it was mostly wasted effort. The shadow on the ground kept pursuing me unhindered. Those shadows would probably keep springing forth from under Rusalka's feet for as long as she drew breath. And like the self-professed jack of all trades she was, it seemed like she excelled at endurance as well. I didn't stand a chance if this turned into a war of attrition. And she knew it too, of course. There wasn't a hint of impatience on her youthful but bewitching face. She was slowly yet surely chipping away at my energy, chasing me around the field like some miserable rabbit.
頑張る頑張る。でもどこまで逃げたって私の影は追いかけ続けるわ。さっさと諦めてこの私に協力しなさい。
協力だと？
そうよ。一緒に協力して目的を叶えるの。
Great. What was she on about now? How ridiculous.
ふざけるな！お前の目的なんざ知ったことか！
あら、冷たい返事じゃない。でもそういうところもあなた素敵よ。
Rusalka slowly licked her fingertips. She'd anticipated my response, yet her eyes were still pregnant with sadism.
だから誘っちゃうのよね。ねえ、私と一緒になりましょう。今なら永遠が手に入るのよ。
Face of those dreamlike words.
永遠だと？
I felt like I got a glimpse at the witch's true wish for the first time. Unchanging eternity, the radiance of a moment existing forever. I couldn't give a shit about her proposals, but those words alone, as bizarre as they were, struck my heart in the oddest of ways. I felt almost like I had glimpsed an innocent part of her that she, as low as she had fallen, had nonetheless clung to and managed to preserve.
そう、永遠よ。エイビヒカイトによっていくら怪我や病や老化をしのげる体になっても魂は違う。人間の魂は100年程度で衰弱し死んでしまうの。私のように 窓を収めて人間の枷から外れたとしてもせいぜい300年かそこらが限界なのよ。私の寿命は尽きかけているの。このままじゃそう遠くないうちに魂が死滅してしまう。でもそんなのは嫌。私はもっと生きたい。まだ足りない。もっともっといっぱい殺して犯して楽しむの。この町の8つのスワスチカを完成させれば今まで集めた魂の数に相当する恩恵が得られるの。私が今まで殺してきた人数は黒煙卓の中でもかなり上位だから不老不死だって夢じゃない。そして
Suddenly, she paused in the midst of her passionate tirade.
私はようやく星になれる。
It was probably something that slipped in unplanned due to her excited state of mind. For I felt I'd gotten a glimpse of a truth that even she herself had forgotten and never intended to show anyone.
夜空に輝くあの光にもう羨みながら手を伸ばさなくて済むから。マリウス・マレフィカムだなんて言わせない。星座を眺めるんじゃなくて永遠に愛される不変になる。水銀を眺めて愛ぎ続けるようなままじゃ
I'll never catch up. I probably just imagined her lips forming those last words. Rusalka looked at my face, but her mind was somewhere else. Somewhere far, far away. It irritated me to no end. It pissed me off more than anything else she'd said or done today. Yeah, it was true, I did like eternity. I craved consistency. I wanted things to keep going on without change or end. Those feelings were still closely knit into me even now. And that was why I knew it was a goal that should never have been pursued while beating one's breast. I couldn't stand her misguided violation of the concept I'd held so dear. She confused the means with the end. I couldn't accept it. Mad glee returned to Rusalka's features as she saw me glaring at her. The sorrow I glimpsed for a moment vanished right then and there. She would probably never show me that expression ever again.
でも安心して。あいつの代理だからってあなたが悪いわけじゃないものね。
Her expression changed suddenly into a gentle smile, sending shivers down my spine and petrifying me as I was about to resume the fight.
レン君、私あなたのことすっごく気に入ってるのよ。だから私のものになりなさい。あなたはね、数少ないあの男の魔術サンプルなの。まるで賢者の石なのよ。あなたと一緒になれれば、あなたを知れば私もっと高く飛べるわ。
The shadow giant jolted back to life in concert with her hysteric voice. Its flat shape covering the roof rose into the three-dimensional plane as if about to wash away the roof like a tidal wave. The jet black wall fell on me. I had no time to run away.
あなたも不老不死になって一緒に生きてあげてもいいわ。全人類を殺してあなたと私が新たなアダムとイブになるのも素敵ね。そしていっぱい子供を産んで人間が増えたら気分で間引く。きっととても楽しいわ。お願いレン君、私と一緒に来てちょうだい。
She was insane. Just imagining a portion of such a world made me sick to my stomach. She wanted to continue that stuff forever? Was her understanding of constancy really flawed to that level? Had she already lost the ability to do something so simple as find a point where her reasoning failed itself? So that was what it came down to, huh? All of her power was nothing more than fuel for her own sick pleasure. What a bad joke. I felt like I was about to throw up.
俺が求めるのはそんな光景なんかじゃねえんだよ。
Living was beautiful. I wished for time to stop because I felt the casual everyday life under the same sun was precious beyond compare. Yet hers was a low-life wish of messing with it to suit her own deprived vision of bliss and then laughing in superiority, playing God.
絶対に認められるか!
And with that sentiment, I set my soul on fire. I made time my own and, extending it to infinity, ducked out of the path of the lethal black waves.
そう、それがあなたの答えなのね、レン君。日常をまだめでて二度と戻れないと分かっていながらまだあがく。
That was right, and I was proud of that. And now was the time to form this wish into concrete shape.
でもごめんね、その痩せ我慢はもう遅いわ。なんだって私さっきかすみに教えちゃったもの。あなたはもう何人も殺してるとっても悪い子なんだって。
なんだって。
In that moment, the concept I'd been weaving together failed to take shape and dispersed. She told Kasumi about it? The tragedy she had so luckily forgotten? She actually told her about it? I slowed down, my strength loosened momentarily. My thoughts froze to a complete halt in the face of the giant shadow crashing down from above.
あなたが来る少し前にね、教えてあげたの。この子、ものすごく錯乱してたわ。気が狂うんじゃないかっていうくらいね。この子、ほっといたら自殺でもするんじゃないかしら。
Shut up.
それとも、鬱陶しいから殺しちゃう？罪人だもの。レイ君のそのギロチンで首跳ねちゃうのもエスプリが効いてて面白いわね。きっとかすみだって嬉しいに違いないわ。大好きなレイ君に殺されるんだから。でもちょっと待ってね、私は拷問してその後がいいわ。あ、でも殺しちゃうかも。かすみってば可愛いし。
Shut up, shut up, shut up!
ねえ、どうする？自殺？首跳ね？拷問し？ねえ、どうするの？ねえ、どうするの
At that moment, something in my head snapped. Boiling waves of undulating rage surged and took dominion of my mind, melding with the imperfect shape of my craving. Shut the hell up, you hag! I won't let you spout off this shit any longer. I'll separate that head weed from insane ramblings from your body right now. Just you wait. Won't be long. I opened a hole in the jet black giant and dashed through it. Though my prayer got cut short and was further diluted by fury, the killing intent distorted by my craving, I was already going fast enough to outpace the witch's sorcery. Slow, still too slow. I broke through the limits of speed and acceleration. I cleaved the shadow coming from above, stabbed the jaws creeping across the ground, and continued to dash. The shadow split and darted in several directions, heading for me from multiple sides, but it still couldn't keep up. I dodged those things with little to no effort. I could wipe them out with but a swing of my arm. 12, 21, 37, I utterly destroyed all those apparitions of deprived sorcery, and had finally gotten within the striking distance of the bitch. I destroyed all of her petty tricks through sheer strength alone. You ready, you senile fuck? It's too late to start getting scared now. Don't think that just because you've lived long enough to die at least 3 times over that you can beat my hollowed prayer.
やっぱりあなたはあいつの代替だわ。嫉妬すら覚えるほどよ、レン君。そしてやはりというかいつもそう、生まれ持った質だけで私を凌駕しようとするなんて、ずっと祈り続けてきたのよ。そういう選択、私が積み上げてきたもので犯してやりたいって。
At that moment, my footing was suddenly devoured by the shadowy jaws. A fissure ran across its surface and opened wide like a giant mouth with disorderly aligned teeth. It utilized its superior numbers, even if its strength lagged behind me in quality. I felt as though the ground I stood on had transformed into a nasty live tiger. I couldn't accelerate fast enough to evade it. I didn't have enough speed. I still hadn't mastered my newfound skill to the level I could run on air. The Iron Maiden had fused with the shadow, and I got completely taken off guard as a damn amateur I was. And the world around me began to slow down, to halt. Her sentiments, emanating from the shadow, overtook me, slowly washing away even the supposedly unwavering oath I just made. It was stopping me.
死体からだって情報は読み取れるのよ。バラバラにして保存してあげる。部位ごとに分けてね。内臓は一瓶ごとに仕分けして脳から直接情報を読み取らせてもらうわ。その目は特別にガラスケースで飾ってあげる。永遠に私だけを見続けるように。
The shadow bit through my skin all the way to my bones and crawled up my body. I'd been caught. Trapped. It had caught up to me. I couldn't run anymore. Its deranged clinginess wrapped around my very soul.
残念よレン君。私あなたのことを気に入っていたのに。普段はこのまま拷問するから声くらいは出せるようにしてあげるんだけれどね。今日はダメ。レン君、なんだかあなた
The look in her eyes shifted from nostalgia to obsession.
なんだか今日はあなたがメルクリウスみたいに見えるんですもの。
Faced with certain death, I struggled to re-enter the state of transcendence. Just another step or two and my own Beria would have been in my grasp. I knew it was the only way to get myself out of the situation, yet the shadow was invading my mind, bringing my thoughts to a halt. The warmth of Mary's soul and the guillotine's blade grew distant. There was nothing I could do.
じゃあねレン君。来て。
The ugly teeth sank into my body. However, at that moment, my predator hunched back in concert with the sound of cleaving flesh. A shine of black iron flew by me just before I could be eaten. A blade pregnant with pure resentment stuck out of Rizulka's chest with a black luster. It was Sakurai's sword. Rizulka looked at the blade sticking out of her chest in shock. She tried to say something, but all she could do was spit up blood. This was likely the result of some sort of poetic justice I was unaware of, an end the crafty witch brought upon herself. And though it came from nowhere, it also opened up my one and only chance for victory. I moved before I could think. I shook off the shadow's bindings, then roared from the bottom of my soul. Ah! I seized the chance and swung the guillotine's blade down. As a result, the battle was settled in but a moment. No, it had probably already been settled by that surprise attack. Her body now limp, Rizulka's head was separated from her neck and fell to the floor. The shadow covering the roof disappeared as if having never been here. The countless souls she'd stocked up were released from their confines and began drifting around like pale mist. Rizulka's corpse vanished, turning to dust in the blink of an eye. The end of the woman who sought eternity came abruptly and passed with almost wistful callousness. But then a sound from nearby brought me back to reality.
Kazumi!
I ran over to her, held her in my arms, and called her name, but she showed no signs of waking up. She was probably shocked after hearing about the truth of the incidents from Rizulka. There were tear stains on the edges of her eyes. My heart tightened with misery as I looked at her in this state. I lifted the unconscious Kasumi on my back as I gritted my teeth in frustration. I picked Sakurai's sword off the ground and left the roof.
借りができちまったな。
I knew she didn't save us out of the goodness of her heart. But as I felt Kasumi's warmth and heartbeat against my back, I couldn't help feeling grateful to Sakurai for the first time in my life. Kei, after throwing Hihi Irokane at Rizulka, fell to her knees, overcome by a sudden pain in her abdomen. The pain of her curse worse than ever before. Kei's face paled as she broke out into cold sweat. She had thrown her blade ready to die. She didn't know if that was enough to beat Rizulka, but she couldn't think of any other way to save Kane. As such, she had no regrets. Strength slowly left Kei's body. Her vision warped, and all sounds around her grew faint. Her chaotic heartbeat pounded in her head. Kei saw him with her blurry vision, losing consciousness as she called his name. At the same time, two shadows clashed against each other in the school. The rendezvous between the man and the demon reached its climax the moment the challenger sprinted forward. Though Shido closed the distance between them in a flash, Wilhelm outclassed him with violence at the speed of sound. His swinging fists were accurate and merciless, threatening to completely decimate the head of his opponent, but... Just a moment before Shido's brain would have splattered like a pomegranate, a metal object interrupted their fight, exploding right in front of Wilhelm's eyes. A flashbang. The intense light was soon devoured by the demonic night, but that was enough time for Shido to disappear from Vampire's vision. There should be a "the" in that sentence. However, it was hardly enough to... Blocking one's line of sight meant nothing in the face of the Scion of the Night. Within his realm, he was sensitive enough to feel everything around him by his skin alone. Robbing him of vision was a wasted effort. Useless. Multiple stakes tore through the light, accurately locked on their prey. Was that all? Was that the extent of his plan? Wilhelm launched his subsequent attack with disappointed contempt, but before his stakes could reach their target, they were swallowed by a wall of flames. An incendiary grenade set the corridor ablaze, filling it with a stench of combustion and snarls of deadly conflagration. Shido escaped certain death only because the gale caused by Wilhelm's incoming stakes blew the fires away from his position. But even if he could predict this kind of outcome, his strategy was still one of utter and complete madness. He didn't hesitate for a second before using an explosive from close range, not minding it could very well have blown himself to pieces. Even a demon of countless battlefields like Wilhelm couldn't help but pause momentarily in disbelief when faced with such seemingly reckless, yet for all matters and purposes, life-saving decisiveness. However, that fire could hardly stop the cruel stakes themselves, as they flew past Shido, shredding his skin. It was only through his genius sixth sense that he managed to get out of this with a mere flesh wounds, yet the impact, as menial as it seemed, was enough to send him flying and crashing into the wall at the end of the corridor. Cracks ran through his bones and one of his legs was dislocated. To a mere human like Shido, this was enough to more or less put him out of the match. And then...
ボケがいい加減学習しろや。
Wilhelm took the 5 bullets that Shido fired just before the impact head-on, without even attempting to swat them. He stood there, exposing his body to the shower of lead, yet not even a scratch ended up on his skin. Crafty, ineffective, hopeless. The brat had guts and imagination, but of all things he chose the exact same trick for his final attack as the last time. Wilhelm couldn't help feeling let down by this development. The Demon of the Night took all attacks head-on in order to deny any naive ideas that he possessed weak points, like some mortal scum. And that was what he was doing when he suddenly realized there was a scratch on his cheek. It hadn't been Shido's bullets, rather, it was something he got as one of the brat's bullets hit a certain object and sent it flying at him. Shido put his life on the line, and all he'd managed to achieve was a single scratch yet. From a logical perspective, such a thing should have been impossible, a most bizarre phenomenon. The vampire shrugged off all direct hits, even if they were equivalent to a collision with a truck, yet a simple piece of metal hurt him this time. In short, hitting him with the object was more effective than shooting him directly in the eyes or mouth.
オッケーオッケー検証終了お前さんやっぱ典型的な王道バンプか
Wait, do we get like stakes? Do we get silver bullets? Silver bullets is a werewolf thing though, right? Vampires are like crosses, garlic, holy water, stakes through the heart, running water, I think? Anyhow.
吸血鬼の不分率どれもきっちり守ってくれて大助かりだぜ最近はこう無敵でチャチなお手軽モンスターが流行りだからよ熱烈信者はこういう時に助かる
Shido Yusa stood up, spitting bloody saliva on the ground. In his hand was the same kind of object that he left a scratch in Wilhelm's cheek with earlier, a silver accessory shaped like a cross. Shido had tested 3 things in exchange for intense pain and wounds: light, fire, and a silver cross. What they all had in common was obvious by this point.
この夜の空間内でかなりパワーアップしてるみたいじゃねえか夜の化け物って言えば定番だろもしかしたらと試してみたらマジで効くとはな
Okay, that was not how I was expecting that to go down. As soon as Wilhelm took the damage on his cheek, I was assuming it was because Shido had shot his bullet at one of the spikes and actually managed to like reflect it back at Wilhelm. And like that would have made sense, right? Because like that's an honor nerve and the honor nerves are like already established to be able to hurt the fascist wizards. But I don't know how I feel about like silver crosses working. That feels overly convenient. Like he's not actually a vampire. He has vampiric qualities and whatnot, but he's I don't know, what is he other than a Nazi wizard? It's probably like a term for this that they used somewhere earlier in the story, but I'm not coming up with it in the moment. But anyways, he's not like an honest-to-God vampire, right? So, I don't know how I feel about, like, stereotypical vampire weaknesses working. Like, I don't know if it's more or less Deus Ex Machina than, Kay threw her sword from the ground just as we were about to die in the previous fight, but at least that one was, like, foreshadowed properly. Whereas this one, sure, they've been using a bunch of vampire imagery for the past 2 hours, but, like, I don't know. Vampires. If Wilhelm really was one of those right now, then Shido's logic was solid. The young man had put his life on the line just to test it. You could pull all the convenient weapons in the world from your pocket, and no one would mean shit against someone imbued with sorcery. He'd known that from the start, of course. He'd known from the sheer pressure he'd felt in his skin before logic and reason could catch up. As such, he had to exploit his opponent's hang-ups instead. Those that claimed their places on the battlefield usually possessed deranged and atypical philosophies. They saw the world through their own lens, and as strange as that sounded, obsessed over the coherence of their twisted interpretation of reality even more than regular men. Shido reflected on that as he triumphantly set his dislocated leg back in place.
というわけで、これで俺にも勝ちの目が見えてきたということならだ。
Well, details mattered little at this point. Now they'd come this far, there was no reason not to try it out.
さあ、2回戦の開始だぜ、吸血鬼。前半はちょっとポイント取られたが、まあ気にしねえよ。問題なし。
Also, he looks like a fucking crazy person. I like it.
なんせこれから俺様が楽勝で勝つんだからな。
He said something that sounded hardly more than a mad delusion. Yet it was no bluff. He really believed he could beat Wilhelm now.
「あんがとよ。なんならもっと楽しませてやるぜ。そうだな。今度はもっときついのを食らわしてやるよ。」
Though he said that, he was out of options. The same trick probably wouldn't work on the monster twice. What was more, the last attack had left Shido bleeding heavily on his right shoulder, meaning he couldn't move as he wanted. His right arm fell off too after he'd used it to punch that bastard. Shido calmly analyzed and perceived just how bad a state his damaged body was in. Judging from his experience, it was clear that defeat was all but certain. Again. Yet he felt neither exultation nor fighting spirit, just pure disappointment. He clicked his tongue in his mind. He'd end up overcome with this feeling every time he found himself in a truly life-threatening situation. It made him want to puke his guts out. Foreknowledge, 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 foreknowledge. Once he felt it, he knew he was invincible. Now there was no way for him to suffer defeat. Not to this bastard, nor to anyone else.
たまんねえな、おい。いいぜ、認めてやるよ。俺が間違ってた。いや、正しかったのか？どっちでもいいな。どっちも同じだ。てめえの血はすする価値がある。てめえとはやり合う甲斐がある。事実だ。認めるぜ。
The whole thing was hysterical beyond belief. The ivory demon couldn't stop the laughs welling up in him. When was the last time Prey had given him such fun? Or since he'd seen a human this bad at giving up? He had several foes in the past who passed the standards of being worthy to devour, but the prey before him now far exceeded all of them. Wilhelm had never expected to meet a brat like this in such a complacent country. That was what made life interesting. He joyfully wished that this ecstasy would last forever.
どこまで付き合える？俺はどこまででも付き合うぜ。てめえの可能性をぶちまけろ。放っておいたらてめえがこれから生きるだろう可能性と命全部まとめて俺に叩き込んでくれよ。てめえが掴むはずだったもん全部に俺の手が届くようになるかもしれね
え。よたってんじゃねえ。言ってることわけわかんなくなってんぜ。
そうだったそうだった。悪いな、独り言さ。ただ俺には俺の手じゃ短すぎるんだ。だからずっと探してた。お前は合格か？
He was clearly looking down on Shido, and yet...
聞くなら意味がわかるように喋れよ。
じゃあこれならわかるかな。
Wilhelm spread his hands out as though he were burying himself to Shido. He wasn't just leaving himself open and defenseless. If he closed those arms, it would mean Shido's death warrant had been signed.
さあ。
Wilhelm smirked, showing off his fangs. Yet his canines were most certainly larger than they were before.
さあ。次の手を見せてみろよ。
Wilhelm smirked and stood defenseless before the clearly incapacitated Shido. But Shido neither showed excitement nor did he even try to raise his gun. He just furrowed his brow as he stared at the sneering vampire. For he had remembered the situation and the fact the school's atmosphere would soon shift and change.
いいところで。
Wilhelm clicked his tongue at the unwelcome interruption. He lightly held his flank. The aching stigmata indicated the school swastika had been opened. He also could tell Rusalka's presence had disappeared. That meant he no longer had any business in this place. I want to eventually find out what the hell is going on with Shido's foreknowledge. Because, like, from what we know of the magic system so far, there's no good reason for him to have it, right? Unless he's, like, secretly Mephistopheles, which would be... You would have to offer me a pretty convincing explanation to pull that one off. He resentfully remembered his orders. Pull out as soon as the swastika is open. The words spoken by Christoph Lohengrin, the divine vessel, compelled him.
残念だ。てめえとの決着はまたお流れだな。次はもっと楽しませろ。今回は時間がかかりすぎだ。会うたびにマシにはなってる。熟成しろ。そうでなくちゃ食い手が足らねえ。
Wilhelm turned around, but Shido called out to his back before he could leave.
次は殺してやるよ。
Wilhelm snorted, remembering the words that had come from his very own mouth. That was his only response. The demon of the night vanished without a glance back. Though Shido had been unable to see what Wilhelm's face looked like at that moment, he could easily picture it. The fierce and wicked grin of a beast. The smile that had come naturally to the monster's face as he pictured their next rematch. Shido found his own lips curving into a smile when he pictured it.
次殺せっかな。
Kay regained consciousness and faintly opened her eyes. Realizing that she was lying on the ground, she slowly got up and checked her surroundings. The school had fallen silent, and Kane seemed to have returned to being a motionless statue. The pain of the curse wasn't as bad as when she'd passed out either.
マレウス
Kay closed her eyes and searched for Rusalka's presence, but couldn't detect even a trace of that unmaskable, depraved aura of hers. Rusalka was dead. No, she had killed her. The bitch wouldn't sully Kane's body any further. Now Kay truly possessed the qualifications to be a full-fledged member of the Obsidian Table. She had no regrets, yet she could feel an odd weight in her breast. She hadn't thought of the witch as a comrade. In fact, she hated her. But the idea that she had killed her seemed like it lacked reality to Kay. Well, whatever the case, her gamble had paid off. Kay approached the motionless Kane.
カイ
She called his name and tried touching him. A mere corpse, Kane wasn't warm like a human. Without Lisa there to freeze his time, his body had begun to age, its decay having advanced considerably in the past few days. At this rate, it wouldn't be long before he started to fall apart.
待ってて私が必ず助けるから
Kay spoke to the mute Kane with a voice full of willpower, as though she was reconfirming her own intentions.
先輩
Himuro was waiting for me, just where I asked. She looked pretty pale back then, but seemed a lot better now.
藤井君綾瀬さん無事に助けられたんだね
ええおかげさまでなんとか
そう
She looked relieved to hear that.
先輩これからどうするつもりですか
Himuro considered me with puzzled eyes.
俺たちと一緒に来てくれませんか
Since Father Trifa and Sister Lisa were our enemies, there was no way Himuro wasn't connected to this. But it didn't look like she held any hostility towards us, and I couldn't think of her as an enemy either.
ほら先輩
I held out my hand to her. I might have already been carrying Kosumi, but I could handle the weight of another girl all right.
言ったでしょ俺にとって大事な人だって
No matter Rhea Himuro's secret identity or whatever she was still a part of my irreplaceable day-to-day life. I didn't want to lose or let her fade from my life. So,
さあ
I was about to tap her on the shoulder when...
親愛なる白鳥よこの角笛とこの剣と指輪を彼に与えたまえ
Something shining was approaching the two of us.
先輩
An explosion of golden light blinded me, and I felt Himuro separate from me, somewhere where neither my voice nor heart could reach her. It all happened in a flash, but...
嘘だろ
Rhea Himuro had completely vanished. Damn it, Trifa. This is why we can't have nice things. As such, this was his victory. He, who had risked the greatest gamble and overcome impossible odds, had in the end proved victorious. For now...
大隊長お三方は封じられたことになる
Well, that makes this route a lot simpler then. Guess we don't get to fight... What's their names yet? Schreiber and... Machina and whatever the third one was. I always forget the third one. Like, Schreiber and Machina are super easy to remember, and then the third one I can just never remember. Trifa held the unconscious Irae in his arms, reveling in the joy of success. The release of the fist swastika should have marked the advent of the 3 Obsidian Round Table's battalion commanders. But the other condition, the Soninkind's wish for death, had been inverted just in the nick of time. Nothing would have been possible if the scales in Dea's mind hadn't shifted toward the desire to live. So wait, Dea is Soninkind? I'm very confused now. I mean, it makes sense. It would feel sort of weird to introduce a new character at this point, so it makes some degree of sense just from that sort of meta perspective for Himuro to be Soninkind, but I'm super confused. And also, like, how the hell is Soninkind's wish for death? Like, how does that affect the battalion commander's ability to show up? I'm so confused. As such, he had to put his plan into motion today, even if it risked summoning the Gold's Imperial Guard. Failure was not an option. He truly made it by a hair's breadth, by the skin of his teeth. He felt this had literally shaved a good portion off his lifespan, but
勝ったのは私だ。
he had accomplished his goal.
そして救われたのはあなただ。
Teresia, now you'll be saved. Rest in ease.
藤井さんのもとに行きたかったのでしょうし、できれば行かせてあげたかったが、それではどうにもならぬのですよ。
Well, I wonder if that has to do with the Ark of the Covenant they brought up earlier, right? Because Shrifa was like, I won't let Himuro use the Ark of the Covenant. And now he's saying, if Himuro wants to die, or if Himuro doesn't want to die, you can't summon the battalion commanders anymore. So maybe that's what the Ark of the Covenant does? It's like something that only Himuro can use, and it allows the battalion commanders to be summoned, and also it kills her. So I'm still not 100% seeing how all the pieces fit together, but that interpretation more or less seems consistent with what the story has told me so far, if nothing else.
誰にもハイドリ秘境は倒せない。
Therefore, this was the only way.
すべてを知れば怒りますか？私を憎みますか？憎むのでしょうね。
But he cared not. Fathers were probably that way by nature. Whether their children hated or shunned them, supporting their flesh and blood from the shadows and shouldering that burden was their job.
せめて彼が悪魔の煮えとならずに済んだ幸運を喜んでほしい。あなたに生きる意志を与え、呪わしき結界から解放される一助となった彼のことを。
Also, why does everyone have to have, like, an important bloodline? This is like, I'm not gonna say it's getting on my nerves, but it feels, heavy-handed almost. Because, like, earlier Rusalka was like, oh, Kasumi is a descendant of such and such, so all this nonsense makes sense. And now, Shrifa's like, oh, Himuro is descended from such and such, and as a result, all of this nonsense makes sense. And it's like, I would like you to at least fill in some of the blanks for me here. Like, you're foreshadowing all of this, like, character development and, plot, and then you're not giving me quite enough to work with. Shrifa made a vow to deliver the young man to the highest of heights as a token of gratitude.
悪魔の城はこれで流出せずに済む。
At least for as long as the divine vessel still drew breath.
要は私が負けねばよいのだ。
The priest then muttered a Sighaya like a prayer, making the sign of the cross as he did. Can't see very much of Sonenkind's picture. Like, it's difficult to make out which parts are which there. Like, obviously the part in, like, the left, right to the, like, directly to the left of the number 6 is the hands, right? You can see the fingers. And then, like, the white stripes directly to the right of those, I guess that's probably her hair. So, based on the color scheme, if nothing else, Sonenkind is almost certainly, or, like, the color scheme on her panel here reinforces the theory that Sonenkind is Himuro. So I guess that's the assumption we're going with going forward. Again, it just makes sense from, like, a lot of perspectives. Like, Himuro is it gives her sort of a role in the greater scheme of things. It saves us from having to introduce a new character halfway through the story. It, yeah, I don't know. So we got 9 of 13, it's still the same, 5 swastikas, that makes sense, given that, Rusalka blew up. Chapter 9, Mass Murder, end. We'll be back for Chapter 10 next time. So I'll catch y'all then.